I'll be dreaming of adverts when I'm at home. They'll be playing in my mind. Or on my mind.
Quick Teller. Everything is possible. Business Express. Brought to you by EnterSwitch. Transaction solutions you can depend on.
Smooth 98.1, love music, love life. I am Mairo-Ese, and it's another edition of Business Express 981. Today's Monday, 24th May 2021, and I have Rotus. Good morning, Rotus. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Lagos. Hope everybody's doing fine on this Money Monday.
Excellent. Money Monday. All right. So this is how you can join the conversation on today's Money Monday. Send your message to our WhatsApp platform 0809 444 0981, or watch us live on YouTube, youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos. You can use the chat box to send us your message. You can also tweet at us at smooth981FM. Use the hashtag Business Express 981. So this morning we're going to be looking at the Q1 2021 GDP reports, and just I look forward to your take on it, Rotus. And another announcement, yet another announcement, that there'll be no fuel increase in June, despite reports last week that the NGF, the Nigeria Governors Forum, endorsed or agreed to go ahead with a 385 naira per litre fuel price. Please take us through these.
Indeed. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can't try to remember the last time the Bureau of Statistics released GDP on a Sunday. This was yesterday. Yemi Kali sent a tweet saying that GDP would be released at 6 p.m. yesterday. So 6 p.m. Sunday, while some of you were in Sunday service or evening service, some of you clicking on Twitter, waiting for the Bureau of Statistics number. So as expected, if you remember, in Q4 2020, we exited recession. I'll raise up my hand and I'll say I was surprised. I did not expect us to exit recession in Q4 2020, but we did, barely 0.1% GDP growth. We followed up on that growth in the first quarter of 2021, 0.51%. So 0.51% GDP growth in the first quarter of this year. Again, 0.1% in Q4 2020. Q1 last year, 2020, was 1.87%. That was, right before things got ugly with the lockdown affecting the Nigerian economy. Again, this was a non-oil growth story. It was pretty much the non-oil sector that drove Nigeria, further in terms of building on the growth that we saw, the marginal growth that we saw in the fourth quarter of last year. Let me get with oil. The oil sector suffered its second consecutive contraction, but it wasn't as bad as the last quarter. Again, GDP is the market value of all goods and services produced in an economy in a given period of time. So the oil sector, as far as the first quarter of this year, contracted by 2.21%. It contracted at 19.7% in fourth quarter of last year. It grew by 5% in the first quarter of last year. So again, consecutive contractions in the oil sector. As far as the non-oil sector, that grew by 0.79%. Q4 of last year, the non-oil sector grew by 1.6%. And again, this is the thing about these two sectors. As far as contribution to GDP, the oil sector contributed 9.25%, while the non-oil sector contributed 90.75%. So you've got the oil sector contributing less than 10% to GDP, yet it is responsible for majority of our FX earnings, 65% of our FX earnings. Meanwhile, non-oil sector, contributing over 90% to our GDP, yet doesn't contribute as much in foreign exchange as the oil sector does. As far as the makeup of the economy, 53.9, almost 54% of the economy is made up of services. About 23.7% or so is industries, and then 22.3 or 22.4 is agriculture. So those are the big three: services, industries, and agriculture. You know, so look, the sectors that really drove, that pretty much drove the growth was ICT.
As expected, yeah.
Yeah, actually telecoms, pretty much telecoms, manufacturing, agri, and real estate. But they dropped. So when people wonder why is it that we dropped from, how is it that some sectors didn't perform as well as others? Because the non-oil sector in the previous quarter, I think it dropped. In this quarter, non-oil sector grew by 0.79%. In the last quarter of 2020, the non-oil sector grew by 1.6%. So there was some slowdown in the non-oil sector. You can thank Issa Pantami and this Nigerian Communication Commission for that slowdown, because some of the sectors that drove growth, we saw some reductions. So like, as I said, it was really telecoms that grew there, manufacturing, which was really food, beverage, and tobacco. That's what drove manufacturing. Agriculture was really crop production, which makes up like 70-something% of agriculture in Nigeria. And then real estate was really, I think it was construction or so, cement. ICT, the big drop in the fourth quarter of last year, which is made up of telecoms, I think, where we are, broadcasting. By the way, broadcasting like 2%, we didn't do anything.
That's not bad. How many broadcasting stations do we have? Please give us the deserved accolade.
Well, we're doing what we can, but remember, we're a country whose population is growing at 2.7%. So your GDP has to catch up with population growth, right?
Yeah.
ICT in the fourth quarter of last year grew by 14.7%, double-digit growth, 14.7. In this first quarter, it slowed to 6.3%. And you can thank the Communications Commission and their SIM card ban and the whole NIN. It's that really, I think subscriptions dropped by like 12 or 13 million or so in that first quarter. That's telecom subscriptions being added to the total figure. So that dropped, and that I think one of the main reasons why the ICT sector didn't really grow as much as it did in the last quarter. Manufacturing.
Can I ask Rotus? Sorry, yes, I wanted to ask at the end, but I don't want to forget. Now we have these figures released by the NBS, and ideally, figures are meant to help decision making. So it's you're meant to use these figures to then analyze and then use to make decisions. When a sector, for instance, the ICT, said to have done badly, in comparison to the last report, are there, I know it's almost a rhetorical question, but are there consequences? Should we investigate? Because you have preferred perhaps a reason why we have such poor figures compared to last year in the ICT sector, which is, a big contributor to the GDP. Should we then evaluate certain decisions we make as a nation? So, banning this ban on new registrations of SIM card for a drawn out period of time. Should we evaluate that? Should we have people responding as to why this was so important with its resultant effect on the GDP?
Of course. I mean, that's what we're doing. This is our job, right? In the private sector to look at these things. Now, I should also point out the fourth quarter, Nigeria usually has healthy growth in the fourth quarter of the year because dirty December, Christmas period, more activity and so on and so forth. So it's usually our best quarter. But again, we're coming from recession. So, things were already tough. So and
the impact of the pandemic, many people weren't traveling. There was no dirty December.
Thank you. So there's usually a slowdown between Q4 and Q1. But this was when you something like this to go from 14.7% for ICT to 6.3. That's, I think that's it. So yes, you have to investigate, but I'll be shocked if we hear the federal government say anything in that
that's why I said it's almost become rhetorical, but I needed to ask that question because we can't stop asking. Let me give another question from Richard here on WhatsApp. Richard says, good morning, business morning crew. Please, Rotus, we would like to know the real reason why our FX reserve has been going down despite crude oil price trading at above $65 per barrel. And then Henry Emmanuel, so Henry Emmanuel says, just a comment. Until we start growing like China, we should consider publishing that, sneaking in these wretched numbers during the weekends.
Speaking of China, there's a guy called I think his name is Wan Long Pin or Luan Pin. He died at the age of 90 over the weekend, being mourned in China. He's a Chinese scientist, and he was famous for discovering hybrids of rice that rapidly grew, and he's being credited with, for some period of time, ending famine and hunger and poverty, not only in China, but in parts of Africa, because what he did with finding different, he used, I love science. He used genetics to crossbreed seedlings of rice and rapidly increase China's yield per hectare for rice. So over there, since some people have mentioned China, thank you for that. FX is going down because the central bank is defending the value of the naira. It's a supply issue. When we've had low supply of FX, the central bank has had to use its reserve. So it's a demand supply thing. They pump more into the market, and as a result of that, their reserves go down. So when you pump FX into increase the supply of foreign exchange, by increasing supply, you're supporting the exchange rate, but it comes as a consequence in that you are, if we had refineries, we wouldn't be spending as much as we do importing refined fuel. I use the of tomatoes and stew. If you say Nigeria can, we've got a lot of tomatoes, but we don't have the cookers or the ovens or the ingredients to make stew. So we import tomatoes and then import stew into nations. The same thing with crude oil and refined fuel.
Fantastic analogy.
Timmy Presilva released another press release on Friday, saying that there will be no fuel price increase in June. Notice how they keep putting the month.
That's yet another announcement.
There's no price increase in April, no price increase in May, no price increase.
They can't guarantee July, but at least for June, they know. How long can we, I know we have just a few minutes, but versus how long can we sustain this?
It's not so. NNPC has already come out and said they can't, for the month of May, FAC allocation, they won't be able to contribute anything to the Federation account because subsidies are so expensive. That's why the NGF, as you mentioned at the top of the show, the Governors Forum accepted the El Rufai-led committee report on deregulation and the 385 naira per litre price. But how many people can pay that? You wasted time. Was the time to deregulate? They didn't, and now they're in a situation where if they increase fuel price, the people will revolt, essentially.
I know you talked on this, but what's your take on fuel being considered as luxury goods? So it's not something that the government should be subsidizing. When we talk about subsidy, shouldn't be looking at education, health, important things. So perhaps it's educating the people, because you don't have to have a car. It's just, are there alternatives that have been provided?
Right. We are subsidizing fuel for the richer Nigerians that have multiple vehicles, multiple homes, big generators. Those are the people who consume the most fuel. Plus, we're also subsidizing fuel for our neighboring countries. I hear fuel goes as far as Sudan because our fuel is cheap. In Cameroon, there's a big business where they take fuel from here and sell it at a cheaper price because they make a profit since it's cheaper here. So we're subsidizing rich people here, we're subsidizing fuel in other countries. So it has to stop. But the common man on the street is going to complain and say, we're increasing fuel right now. What are you giving me? It's a tight situation.
It is. It's very tight.
Very tight.
Well, thank you very much, Rotus. We're out of time. A good conversation as always. Look forward to tomorrow morning, same time. Join us at 6:30 for another edition of Business Express 981. You can still ask Rotus questions anyway online if you want to. Use the hashtag Business Express 981 and tweet at us at Smooth981. 981 FM. Also tweet at Rotus. You can tag him in the tweet at RotanQuote on Twitter. Thanks, Rotus.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have some great music lined up for you here on Smooth 98.1. And then, of course, at 7:30, we bring you today's edition of Freshly Pressed 981, detailed analyses of the news of the day's news headlines. In the course of the day or of this morning, you can go onto any of our social media platforms to read ahead of time the headlines. So go onto our Twitter handle, Instagram story, WhatsApp story to familiarize yourself with the headlines ahead of our 7:30 show. Smooth 98.1, love music, love life.
Press, brought to you by EnterSwitch.
Thank you all so much.